Backs in the news here for Dynasty circles, and want to start out with two being released of import with their previous historically productive profiles. That is Ezekiel Elliott and Leonard Fournette. And both of them 28 years old and productive backs as recently as last season, but being released by their current teams, yet to be replaced also in any important fashion with their respective depth charts. But Ezekiel Elliott and Leonard Fournette are now being thrown around in dynasty trading circles as add-ons, as completely insignificant elements. I made a trade just this week where Leonard Fournette was an afterthought being traded even on the lower band of backup running backs in the NFL. Both Elliott and Fournette will find work in the NFL. It may not be this week. It may be after the NFL draft, but they still have plenty in the tank to be 1B starters or 1A starters on NFL depth charts. And at worst, injury away options that can pressure the starter or fill in for weeks at a time, as we've seen them long-standing starters in the NFL. Other news of the week and of the free agency period here is the Buffalo Bills backfield. And we have Damian Harris going to Buffalo. We had Zach Moss as a former day 2 option a year ago. He is off that depth chart, but Damian Harris going within division here. And Jordan, very exciting about James Cook, because this is the exact type of signing and addition probably looking for, because Harris blocks other players from coming in, but also isn't a significant threat to the round 2 pedigree and James Cook here entering year 2.
Yeah, I think it's a great signing for James Cook. And I was surprised because I actually put a poll on, like we were talking in the staff chat about the whole situation. And I said to them, my initial immediate reaction was, this is great news for James Cook. That was what our sort of initial reaction was internally from some people. And then when we put it out on Twitter, it was like 60-40 split saying this was bad news for James Cook. I think that this rules out a Bijan Robinson signing or a draft pick, right? I don't think they're going to go first round running back now. Damian Harris, like you and I like Damian Harris, in a general sense, but I don't think Damian Harris is a threat to what James Cook really does. And where Damian Harris would be a threat to James Cook, it's down in the red zone. I mean, he had 15 rushing touchdowns a couple years ago, right? That's Josh Allen territory, right? That wasn't a place where you're going to really depend on James Cook anyways. So I don't even they play the same position, but they don't really score the same way. So that's the thing that I think about. Like he actually protects and insulates James Cook from worse damage.
Yeah, and one thing about James Cook that I got a few shares last year, it's because he fell to a certain point in the draft where you say, round 2 running back, I have to be in on this at the requisite price, is that he has juice. Watching him in year 1, the get through the hole factor with running back, we're not going to get super film nerd here, but it is it is a pronounced difference between some that are slow in their acceleration, their first few steps. I think you can also phrase it as the first 5 yards for these running backs. And James Cook has that. And for some of these quick pop offenses where they're going to play light boxes, you're worried about the quarterback, you're worried about the passing game, you're worried about what's going to happen outside the pocket as the break your back, plays against your defense. And a lot of times the pop right up the middle. We saw that with Baltimore's run game. We've seen that with Philadelphia's run game. And if you just have an explosive back that can get straight ahead, the 49ers with Elijah Mitchell, what was his biggest quality? Get vertical and get right away, get up the field. And James Cook, there's a huge difference between Devin Singletary, who's not there now, with his 4.6, and frankly, his explosion, it was not right there. Neither was Zach Moss. And I actually think we have Damian Harris, a better version of Zach Moss here. So that's good news. But James Cook has more than any of those backs mentioned, where if the hole is there, it was going for 10 plus and just carving defenses. And now we're going to see bigger volume with that in play. But like you said, it doesn't seem like the market is fully on board with this James Cook as a breakout player this year yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still a buying opportunity, right? I mean, in the teens, like I started looking at some stuff today. I mean, you look at early year stuff, right? You might say, all right, Dameon Pierce over James Cook in Dynasty, but when you start thinking about it, right, the base rate's way higher for James Cook, right? The threat rate stuff, right, which is how how often a team drafts a player over. With superior pedigree in a following year, right? Basically, how likely is it historically a team in a situation like Houston with Dameon Pierce is likely to draft someone with a higher draft pick this year than they drafted Dameon Pierce last year, right? That's like 31%. For the Bills, it's 4% with James Cook, right? Substantial difference there. Historically, very unlikely, and I think that Damian Harris basically makes it 0. So there's still a chance that they draft someone, right, with a better pedigree than Dameon Pierce, right? Similar with like Tyler Algier. Like, and again, you just start looking at these guys, like the hit rate, the density rates for guys in round 2 is a lot deeper and a lot longer and a lot higher than it is for round 4, round 5 guys. So I find him still to be very low. Like, and again, I think it's a buying, like, don't you want the pass catching offense in a Josh Allen, like the pass catching running back 1 in a Josh Allen led offense? Right, they were 10th in the league in routes per dropback last year. Devin Singletary just didn't produce. That's basically it. That's the entire story of Devin Singletary's career. Like, if Devin Singletary was efficient, Devin Singletary would have probably been a top 10 running back multiple years over, but he wasn't. Right, and James Cook, I think, has that in his bag.
Yeah, and when you look at some similar running backs in terms of cost, you're either in the 27 or 28-year-old bucket, which you're basing it probably on 1 year. Can I get one more good year where you could get that from James Cook? You got Cam Akers in that zone of where are the Rams right now, and we still haven't seen enough from Cam Akers in that bucket. And another name of the younger variety, younger, both of them, James Cook and Rachaad White, who I'm mentioning now, came out older there for the draft, is that Rachaad White doesn't have the security of James Cook, like that there was an addition to block off some of this draft. That right now with Rachaad White, we're still waiting and watching Fournette being gone. But that opens it up to, are they really going to have Keyshawn Vaughn as the number 2? Are they really is that going to be the final depth chart where I think we have higher confidence with Buffalo? It's going to be Cook, it's going to be Harris, and it's going to be Naheem Hines. And that's the 3, main running backs on this depth chart. And that is a major factor. As the years go, this time period from mid-March to mid-May, that you want, it's the Alexander Madison effect. You want a good enough running back in that number 2 spot so that you're not at high risk of them splashing with a best player available at a light depth chart. You look at some of these running back depth charts, and when they're light, they're doing something. They're not going to go all the way, like just to pick a player. I mean, they're not going to go into week 1 and say, Spencer Brown, you're our number 2 option. They're going to find someone else off the free agency or somewhere in the draft of import. And that's a scary proposition for, just not an elite, completely secure back where you're like, I don't care what they do, because most running backs in the NFL are not that way.
For sure.
Other news we've got, and I'll tell you, Miles Sanders, if you had gave me odds that Miles Sanders was going to be the clear biggest contract in free agency, I wouldn't have believed you. Going to Carolina, the fact that Chuba Hubbard has not really pressured, if anything, he's been pressured from behind as opposed to pressuring above him in his time so far in Carolina. But yet Chuba Hubbard is probably good enough to say that he wards off some running back 2 challengers. So Miles Sanders, big money. Now, the quarterback, the passing game, they need to add to it. They've got plenty of questions. But Miles Sanders, talk about a golden opportunity for a player that he's been languishing for a couple of years now. But man, he was off to a start of catching a bunch of balls, and I think he's going to get back to that in Carolina. So good news for Miles Sanders here on a lot of different fronts at age 26.
Yeah, for sure. And my question ultimately with him is the ceiling. I had a question for you. I was having a conversation with somebody else earlier this week, and really thinking about, who's got, like, who would you rather make a bet on right now, Miles Sanders or David Montgomery? And I don't think there's a clear right answer. Was kind of my I started thinking about this from a couple of different ways. I thought initially Miles Sanders looked like a clear starter. The question I would have is, A, what's the ceiling? B, how much does he offer in a receiving role? You and I have detailed some of the questions that we have with DeAndre Swift and the carries, right? He has, it's been what he's had, like 4 or 5 double-digit carry games since his 33 carry game, like 18 months ago. Like, he's not a bell cow. And you bring in a guy like David Montgomery, who can basically play to the level of an offense, right? That's basically what David Montgomery's greatest strength is, right? He's perfectly capable of doing whatever the offense asks him to do. I wouldn't ask him to do a lot more. I'm not going to ask him to do a lot less, right? He's going to play basically to the competency of the offense. And and Swift's going to be a free agent. So we could actually be sitting here in a year from now and being like, wow, we should have seen this kind of coming. I don't know. Like, I think it's,
Well, you said they're similar. I have David Montgomery a tier higher, and it may only be a handful of spots,
right?
Yeah, and I do have a tier break, because think of where these offenses are going. Because part of that is we've seen this Lions iteration. If they're better this year, if Jameson Williams actually helps out and lightens boxes and adds the vertical dimension, and if David Montgomery comes in, and the expectation, to be fair, it should be what Jamal Williams did as a minimum. That would be his role. Good touches, good touch total, a lot of goal line, 10 plus, if not higher, touchdown upside. And there's a possibility for more. So, because it's another year of, we still got DeAndre Swift, we're not happy with this, and they chose Jamal Williams, they're choosing David Montgomery. And if it's a rising tide Detroit offense, I think it's very easy, both at 26, it's very easy to be more excited about David Montgomery, who got a similar per year amount, $6 million or so, which is big money in running back land outside of tags and, players that are getting that hometown recycle and reaffirmation stuff like Saquon Barkley. We saw Zeke a few years ago. McCaffrey got a big low. So there's rare players, but in the land of open free agency, $6 million per year is a good number. And Montgomery got exactly that as well. So I don't think it's that much of a conversation. And I'm one of the bigger people in Miles Sanders out there, but I still have him in the 20s. And I think it gets dicey by the mid-teens at running back, maybe even earlier. And I have David Montgomery in the teens just because I think the upside of, let's play out a world where DeAndre Swift misses a month. What does that look like? So
yeah, right.
And Miles Sanders, I'm already projecting with him. I mean, I don't think he's largely affected by injury on the depth chart, and it could be a much worse Carolina offense, much worse.
Yes, I agree with all that. I don't think the market's there. We've still seen Montgomery sort of lingering way behind. I think, you're in a spot where you could potentially have him. I haven't checked your rankings, but you could potentially have him ahead of Swift, right? That's the type of range that you would have them in.
Right. Same tier. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like, I think you're right about, in a best case scenario, Montgomery can really move the needle. Again, it's so funny that Montgomery, like, here we are, like 4 years later, banging the drum on Montgomery, because 4 years
We were
ago
out on him, right? Yeah,
we were like, we don't want to spend
too
102 in
high.
a rookie draft on Montgomery. We don't want to
It's
do that.
Latavius
But now
Murray
we're
all
like,
over again. He's going to get a truckload of
yes,
chances over the next 3 to 4 years to have strong touches in the NFL. And you watch, he's going to be just good enough to take advantage of said opportunities, whether it's right now looking like he's going to be the 1A, if he devolves into a 1B or injury away option. Yeah, it just seems like now that he's running back 20s, he'll slip to the 30s, he'll slip to the 40s, and we'll just kind of keep being in on that over and over again. Will be our tagline.
He's going to be the running back in a top 5 offense. It's available like 25, RB 25. By the way, don't you think that there's a role, like, I've kind of seen the argument of basically like he's just basically a souped up Jamal Williams, right? He's going to do what Jamal Williams did. If they were going to use him for that, don't you think they would have paid 3 for 12 for Jamal Williams instead of paying 3 for 18 million for David Montgomery? Like, wouldn't they save themselves $2 million a year and $4 million guarantees?
This is unquestioned starter money. True or false?
100%.
I mean,
100%.
In running back land, this is true. I mean, this is like if you give 20 million to a wide receiver, you are expecting them to be the one or one of the strongest 1-2 punches in the NFL. Like if that were the case, we saw that with Christian Kirk.
We do a little bit of
paid big money.
Yes. Yeah. Just another thing too, like when you look at the historically, right? When you look back at the contract guarantees on running backs, right? Going back, like last year, the most was Fournette at $9 million. The year before that, Kenyon Drake at 11. In 2020, it was Melvin Gordon at 13.5. And then before that, it was total guarantees. Like Le'Veon Bell was really the big contract before that. But really, since the Le'Veon Bell contract, David Montgomery is right there, but he's behind Melvin Gordon. And obviously behind Miles Sanders this year. But like historically, if Miles Sanders didn't exist, we'd be looking at this David Montgomery contract being like, wow, that really sticks out. But because there's 2 of them together, I think we appreciate it less. The same thing, by the way, Jamal Williams, like he in almost any year in terms of his guaranteed money would be running back 2 in terms of free agent contracts. And Alexander Mattison also would be running back 2. Like that $6 million guaranteed to Alexander Mattison, we didn't even get there, which is amazing that we've got 18 minutes into the show and we've gotten to
exactly.
We've gotten there. So
Alexander Mattison forever, because here's the thing. I think it's super smart because we know they're 1 foot in, 1 foot out on Dalvin Cook. You have so many outs with Alexander Mattison. We've already seen the outs, which is just elite injury away option that at any point you can light with a match and just throw down the hallway and blow people up in season. So we already know we have that going back to Minnesota. There were outs and there were outcomes that would have had him as a starter in one of these other scenarios. But going back to Minnesota, it's one of the most uncertain incumbent starters in the NFL right now in Dalvin Cook. It's a big contract. Are they going to get out of it? Is that going to be something where they move him maybe in draft for a pick or something? So there's still plenty of avenues. But worst case, we still have what we already had for the entire rookie contract of Alexander Mattison, which is still not a bad scenario. Posted away on your dynasty bench.
Yeah. What do you think what's the likely outcome for Dalvin Cook, right? This has got to be bad news for Dalvin Cook, right? You don't sign Alexander Mattison to this number.
Right. It means that they want to have a plan because we are exploring something else. That's what that means, right? I mean, you want to stay flexible. And that, I mean, sidebar, and I mean this for 5 seconds, but like, this is why if I were the Jets, if I were the Jets, this is why I would do something quarterback wise to put the screws on Green Bay. Because again, it's all about leverage. So again, getting Mattison means we have a plan. And again, I don't know what percentage you would put on it, but Dalvin Cook week 1 on the Vikings, I mean, that number is lower than it was a month ago. And I think we're going to still see more. Like they're going to attempt this. It's just, will they find a buyer at, where they're not paying a big portion of the salary, and if they get enough of what they deem requisite in a pick. But I do think that that's in their plans. But it's where it would go.
Right. And you look at them, like Dalvin Cook's their 5th biggest cap hit right now. They're over the cap right already, sort of this offseason by almost $8.4 million, and they can cut Dalvin Cook and save 6 of that. So I think the writing's kind of on the wall here with what they've done, that he is gone, whether that is a trade, whether that is a cut, right? Maybe it's even a post June 1 cut. I don't know if because they've done that with Thielen, they can do that again, or I don't know exactly how that works. But they could save $8 million in cap savings. They could basically get under the cap by trading Dalvin Cook. Right? They could basically get under the cap by doing that. So, yeah. I think the writing's on the wall here, and this is a smart, forward-looking franchise. That I think they get it with the running back values, with the running back contracts. They're not paying Madison that much money, and they can't really afford to pay Cook, right? I don't know. I would put it as like just less than 10% chance he's back there, right?
Just looking around, I'm going to put two things together, which is what we're discussing with Dalvin Cook. But how about the talk out of Atlanta over and over again? We are adding backs. We are not done. And the fact that they wouldn't have to spend draft capital, the fact that, 33 years old now for Cordero Patterson and Tyler Algier, they can, keep monitoring him for progress. But it just seems like the tea leaves out of there is, I'm not saying it has to be Dalvin Cook specifically, but they've been fervent with, this is not going to be our final depth chart. That we need more horses, just more. That's a DNA of our offense. So I was looking around all the depth charts and team needs and stuff, and Atlanta was the one where I could see the cap plus what we've heard, and that coming together where they're not addressing it really hard with their first pick or two in the draft. So,
are they a Bijan Robinson team?
You mean at 8?
Yeah.
See, here's what I find funny. Like, it seems like you started January, February, and it's all like, oh, I didn't find a spot in my mock draft for Bijan Robinson in round 1. And then it seems like the last week or two, it's like, well, there's no way he's getting to Dallas at 27. So it seems like now it's finally heating up to the point of like, yeah, he is one of the best players. And it seems like someone before pick 20 is going to dive in. I mean, I don't know how he gets past the Chargers, right? Wouldn't the Chargers insulate themselves by drafting Bijan Robinson at 22 and saying, Austin Eckler, like you're going to be on this team this year, but 2024, you are absolutely not on this team. And we're going to transition to someone that's actually cheaper, on a rookie scale there in the later first round. But I don't even know if he's there for the Chargers. It's a fun game playing. Where does Bijan Robinson go? Because at some point, someone's going to say he's the best player on the board and we're just going to take him. And I'm going to applaud the team that does, because it's going to elevate your offense more than, once you see that drop off in tackles and Skoronski's gone and, the quarterbacks are gone. Like, the answer is going to be Bijan Robinson. And that everyone that's trying to talk themselves into taking Michael Mayer of like a playmaker over Bijan Robinson. I mean, we can talk positional value and what's going to happen 5 years from now, but Bijan Robinson is going to make more of a difference for you.
By the way, it's worth noting, I think you're right. And there's data to back this up. So Grinding the Mocks, our friend Benjamin Robinson at Grinding the Mocks, he tracks all this data. We've talked about this in prior years. It's worth noting. Go over to grindingthemocks.com. You can check out all this stuff. It's great. They just updated their data yesterday, right? I think it goes in like a week or 2 week cycles at this point in the offseason. Then he sort of ramps it up in terms of it aggregating. But sharp increase for Bijan Robinson, right? He was loitering sort of in the later 20s, in the mid, I guess I would say like right around 20, sort of mid 20s. In that range, it has jumped up to his expected draft position is about 16 right now. And
that's
right. So it's moving in a way that, like, again,
one spot just to pull it into running backs here. One spot I've seen a few times has been New England at 14. So
does that make any sense to you?
It doesn't. No, it doesn't to me. I'm like you. I like Ramondre Stevenson. Okay. I think he offers a lot. So, but I've seen that. But you figure what's getting it to that number, because that means there's some behind. I mean, could that be Tampa Bay at 19, Chargers at 22? But what's drawing it above that number? Is that the Titans planning ahead? Of saying we're going to go to another workhorse. Is that the Eagles at 10? I've seen that one. You mentioned Atlanta. So could that be the Bears? It's a 1 year lower level deal for Deonta Foreman. So to say that makes them being out on running back, I don't think is accurate either. Yeah. And right. So this is one where please don't rule out, you're sitting here and you're like, things worked out great for me on my dynasty team and free agency. this is a Trey Mason risk factor because you could get a couple of first round running backs. There's a couple more on day 2 that you should fear if they're added, that they're going to be the starter sooner rather than later. And even if it's midseason or later season, it's coming. It's a bomb that's going to explode, and it's going to turn your veteran or whoever right now you're projecting for the most touches into someone that is now grasping for other opportunities, whether that they devolve into an injury away or they're out in the weeds hoping for opportunities here 12 months from now. So that's
Can I interest you in a little bit more Bijan Robinson data while we're here? We've gotten you here. We're talking rookies now, by the way. I started studying rookies.
Got Jordan into it. Now he's citing data.
Now I'm citing data.
2 months I couldn't get him into it.
You couldn't get me to talk about it. Now I can't. Now I won't stop talking. You
look
like you can actually see sort of where the picks are coming in on the where Bijan Robinson is being selected in mock drafts, and it is not at 14. Right, that's a very rare spot for him to be taken. What you're actually seeing is 8, 9, and 10, and a little bit.
8, 9, 10 are the 20s basically.
So basically,
coming together for a 16.
His 6, which is Detroit, 8, which is Atlanta, 9, which is Chicago, which we'll see, and then 10, which is the Eagles, which I think is unlikely. But if the market is moving him into that range, like that spot at 8, it seems like there's a lot of smoke to sort of that. And again, that's like we started counting earlier on, right? If they weren't going to be in, if they're not in the trade up for a quarterback range, like this is like one of the most run-centric teams in the league. Like it makes a lot of sense for them to adjust the position. Again, this is probably
they were giving significant, meaningful touches to Caleb Huntley, and for all the good that Caleb Huntley did, he ran like a 4.7 something, and he has no receiving profile. So yeoman's work for him. But I mean, the fact that they were ragtagging this together, I'm sure their plan wasn't Algier, Patterson, and Huntley when they were drawing it up in the sandbox. So, I mean, if you add Bijan Robinson, right, and you move Patterson to more of a playmaker role, as opposed to traditional or closer to traditional running back, and you have Algier as the 1B, now you're really cooking. And especially if you want to protect, and your plan right now is Desmond Ridder, then again, that can get you to winning that division. That can get you places, and maybe you throw in a quarterback next year, or maybe it's even more appealing. When we see development from these younger players coming together around whether Ridder is the answer or not.
Absolutely. I
got to specifically dial in on one more, which is Jamal Williams. So he leaves Detroit.
Oh boy.
And is New Orleans not one of the best spots to land with what is going on right now? Now, it doesn't preclude them from adding to the position. However, you getting that number 2 spot. I mean, how valuable was that with Mark Ingram over the years? That Alvin Kamara could be suspended. Alvin Kamara also is one that enters 28 years old. He hasn't quite been the same dynamic version of himself in recent years. And, they have pick 30, pick 41. That's not Bijan Robinson's zone. And you would say they have other needs as well. So this is a team that getting Jamal Williams feels close to probably the biggest move they're going to make here. And that's one of the more valuable number 2 spots as we go around the dial. For an older running back, we just saw a big season, but he's still not going to have the dynasty value that just because of age and just because he's not a highlight reel profile that's going to have a lot of appeal at this stage in his career.
Yeah. And like, there's a non-zero chance that Kamara's suspended, right? Like that's an out for him. Like, again, like the question you end up kind of finding yourself with is his situation kind of better than it was last year? I think the offense, I mean, I don't know. Like, I think that Detroit offense was really good. I'm not sure, I think Derek Carr could probably play to that level, right? I think Jared Goff's due for a little bit of a regression, even though we still like the Lions. I don't know. I thought Jamal Williams wore down last year at the end, right? I think I don't know. I mean, they clearly don't think that he's a 3-down guy, right? They paid more for David Montgomery. And we're using Justin Jackson, right? So they know that. And now he's going over to New Orleans. Like, is a role where is a full, 80% snap role when Alvin Kamara is out for a month, right? Is that something that Jamal Williams can capitalize on, right? Maybe in a 4-game sample size, maybe in a 6-game sample size, right? I don't necessarily think the whole year, but you don't really need it. And then he's probably like a streaming option, a touchdown guy. I don't know. Kamara's been good at the goal line, so it's tough. Like I kind of put him more in a pure injury away role. Where I think that there are outs. I think he's one of the higher end guys, more so than like last year. I thought he was a streaming candidate for much of the year.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just on the higher band of and getting to this point in his career and being out in the wilderness of free agency, not a bad outcome. Decent money as well as landing in one of those choice spots. If he did have options, I think he chose pretty well in terms of having a spot where you have a suspension out for 4, 6, 8 weeks, and you also have outs of just being an injury away option. And if that's 10 touches a week, while Kamara is healthy, then, again, that's something you can manage for the glut of the year, outside of those. I'm going to be the captain, for the specific span of time. Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 146 of the Football Guys Dynasty Show. And we got trades this week galore. And Jordan, we got a couple here from the FFPC Triflex. Have you ever played that Triflex where you get the added Superflex plus an added flex in addition to their tight end premium format?
I have not. It'd be something we have to jump into.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got a couple big trades this week. So we got FFPC Triflex Best Ball, AJ Brown being traded for the 101. So that is Superflex format. And you got 101 here being dealt for a cornerstone wide receiver.
Which one of these guys is more replaceable? That's the question that I would ask, right? Which asset is more scarce, right? We should caveat this with 101's more valuable than Bijan Robinson is, because if Bijan Robinson, were to, retire tomorrow, right, it still has value that beyond just Bijan Robinson, right? You could take somebody else. So there's sort of that caveat. However, 101's so expensive because it's Bijan Robinson this year that you're not really playing kind of that game, right? In other years, you might be saying like, hey, this might be player X, but if it's a landing spot, kind of like the Clyde Edwards-Helaire year, right? If this was a landing spot, that it's someone that could actually jump a guy like Jonathan Taylor or jump a guy like, Joe Burrow that year. I don't think that's the case this year. So just caveat that. I think this is Bijan Robinson for AJ Brown, right? That's what I see this trade as. I think I'm taking Bijan Robinson. And the reason why is I think you can get, I really like AJ Brown, but I think you can replicate his production because I don't think he's a true candidate to finish as like a top 1 or 2 wide receiver. I think you can replicate his production better than you can a 21-year-old first-round running back entering his prime.
Yep, agree with all that. I'll just say in the wide receiver landscape, if I were trading 101, the list would stop at Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. And then anyone else, I would say, no, thank you. I'm keeping 101. I'm drafting Bijan Robinson, and I'm moving on with my life in a very formulaic and an easy decision fashion. So, yes. And that even includes Jalen Waddle, who I'm one of the highest on, and I have AJ Brown in my top 5. So I think there's some clear lines drawn in the sand there, and you've got to get into the unicorn status of Jefferson and Chase for me to consider that for 101.
Who's in the? So you mentioned 4 out of the top 5. Who's the 5th one?
It's a pretty flat tier. So AJ Brown I have near the top of that tier, but all the regular guys like Metcalf and Higgins and Amon-Ra St. Brown, guys like that. And then I venture into some older guys, depending on what your direction. Okay. All right, we got one more Triflex. So same sort of thing. We got Superflex. We got the added starting lineup boost. 111 being dealt for Jordan Love, pending starter for this year, and then a couple 5th-round picks, which turn into, you're making week 1 bets. And we've talked about that before on the show, where it's a deep annual draft and short rosters, which means round 5 picks may not even be on your roster by week 2.
This is basically treating Jordan Love as quarterback 5 of this class, right? I'd take the swing, right? I mean, you're going to take you're going to kind of hope to take a 1st-round wide receiver there, right? At maybe best in a class that I don't think we love. You're going to potentially take, a day 2 running back in a class that I'm not necessarily sure we love the guys that are there. The other option that I would say, have you shopped this pick around for a potentially better quarterback, right? Before you sort of pull the trigger on this deal, have you done your due diligence?
Cousins, Goff, think undervalued guys that you could probably procure for a late 1st.
Correct. So that would sort of be the, and what type of bet do you want to make, right? If, we've talked about this, right? Do you want to bet on Jordan Love? If your quarterback is, if you got a weak top two, right? It's maybe not necessarily that you want to go maybe Carr, Cousins, something like that. But if you have, if you've got Mahomes and Allen, right? I'd rather take a big swing on a guy that could potentially make a huge difference because that's an asset, right? So that's kind of the way that I would view this. Listen, I think Jordan Love is quarterback 5 in this class. Like, yeah, I would do that, right? I think that's what this price is. Again, with the caveat, have you done due diligence? I would take Jordan Love with this price. I think it's fair.
If you had to adjust whatever your sights were, Jordan Love entering the NFL with what you knew about him at that moment, do you think that the prolonged wait and the way this is the fact that he has been off the field for so much, the fact that he is, whether they get along, they're best buds, they boat in the summer, whatever, that being around a strong quarterback and just seeing weekly what the NFL is. And we've seen this for 1 year stints. We used to see it for multiple years. We rarely see it for multiple years. Now we rarely see it for one whole year. So do you think it's overtly a positive for Jordan Love? Would you view him exactly the same as when he's coming in terms of his odds of hitting, his odds of, hitting a certain ceiling threshold? Do you see it as a positive or a negative? Like a negative that they haven't moved on from Rodgers because we know Love is so good that we haven't had that data point, or that it could be a positive because you just, you've gotten to see a lot without, almost we've ruined a quarterback timetable sometimes with throwing them in there just over and over and over again weekly.
I mean, I'm sure we would have seen Jordan Love earlier on in his career if Aaron Rodgers hadn't gone back-to-back MVPs, right? That was their plan, right? And Rodgers, to his credit, foiled the plan, right? Which was good for fantasy.
Last year, not an MVP. And now it's like, well, it's time to go.
Exactly. So, I mean, and here's the way that I would kind of process Jordan Love at this point, right? He's going to be entering, basically, they have to give him his 5th year. They have to guarantee his 5th year option if they're going to exercise it in the coming weeks, right? I'm assuming that they're going to do that. So that way they basically have him on 2 years. It's not a ton of money, right? So you're kind of like, he hasn't really done anything, so he doesn't hit any of the escalators or anything like that. So from a financial perspective, it makes a lot of sense for them to do that, which I expect that they will do. And then, they're going to get basically a 2-year audition, right? And I think like a couple of things are, we don't know, right? We're not in the building, but I think you can make a couple of educated guesses. Number one, they haven't been comfortable moving on from Rodgers before. He was game day inactive early on in his career. And, now a lot of the talk has been pretty positive coming out of camp, right? Yeah, about players, right? Or coming out of their building, from players, from coaches, from people in the organization, right? Anonymous quotes, all that stuff. Some of that's probably messaging, right? But, it's vastly, like, they haven't addressed the position with other guys, right? Like just look at their actions, right? They're willing to walk away from Rodgers and haven't, right? They didn't bring in Gardner Minshew. They didn't bring in Jacoby Brissett. They didn't bring in potential bridge guys. They didn't sign Sam Darnold. They didn't sign Baker Mayfield, right? They didn't sign guys like that. Right? This appears to be, they're going to let them roll. And like, they're smart, right? They're, I think, a smart organization, right? You can pick nits with some of the decisions that they've made, but I think they've got the long view in mind with the way they make financial decisions and player decisions. And I think, if there was this huge concern that he wasn't ready, they would have done something other than what they've done. And so, because
this was the offseason in quarterback land of, there were many options. We saw Washington go with Brissett. We saw even Miami, right? They went on the higher end of the band outside of the Derek Carrs of the world to go for Mike White for almost, we could squint and see this guy as a secondary plan if something doesn't go right, in terms of salary and money. And Brissett is sort of in that lens as well. And you mentioned, I mean, there's just a litany of quarterbacks that can be viewed in that lens, and they went after none of them, which I think is relatively telling. And I'm with you. The 111 in Superflex, I would take Jordan Love. I have him in the same tier, but higher than Will Levis. I have some big concerns on Will Levis. I know he's going to get more pedigree than Jordan Love, but I kind of view it as a positive. I think the sitting and watching and processing and going over things a million times, if he was rough around the edges, I think it only helps. in general. And there's upside. The live arm factor, he drew the, oh, look, he's a homeless or poor man version of Mahomes, when he was coming out. Now that could be ill-advised, and people shoot their shot when they see a few highlight throws and they say he's erratic otherwise and he has some flaws. Oh, we're going to get that Mahomes comparison. If the guy's big, we're going to see it's a Josh Allen comparison. So that's not going to end. That's going to keep going for a while here. And Jordan Love was in that prism. But what it does say is he has arm talent that was worthy of round one. And if you can rein that, if you can harness that into some positives, and he's sporadically played. But this last time that we saw him come in and and he threw, 10, 15 passes or whatever, looked the part. And not to say that has any factor in what the Packers are doing. It's mainly, it's time to move on from Rodgers. We knew that. We knew this was coming. All the things that Andrew Brandt says, on a weekly basis. And he's been talking about it for years about what the plan would be. And only the MVPs did that. But I think, again, 11, and I think going back to the first point, you said, look at this as you're getting QB5. And there's a pretty big drop off in terms of what that profile looks like probably this year between QB4, which is probably going to be in the top 5, 6, 7 of the NFL draft, and QB5, which is probably going to be Hendon Hooker, and it's probably going to be somewhere on day 2. That's a pretty big drop off. You slide Jordan Love in there at 111, and again, I think that's pretty fitting. And frankly,
do you know who the third string quarterback in Green Bay is? So behind Rodgers and behind Jordan Love.
Not offhand.
Danny Etling, which kind of tells you what you need to know about.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I have an injury away matrix, and I remember looking at it of like, if we delete Aaron Rodgers right now, it's Danny Etling, who's more of like a running guy. That's like, it's going to be really interesting if he gets into a game more than like running the offense.
Correct.
The other thing I would say is also in FFPC, this is a good year for tight ends, but one public service announcement: please don't push up rookie tight ends because it's 1.5 PPR in these shallow rosters, because the benefit of like moving into your flex spots is not overt, and generally the weight factor is pronounced. So if you're sitting there in the late first, I wouldn't recommend it. Like you can trade that for a much better starting option and flex option and just tight end option. If you were to trade that pick for a veteran as opposed to drafting the likely slower developing rookie. So just be careful on that.
Yeah. Can we go a step further on Danny Etling trivia? Do you want to guess how many teams he's been on in his career? So he went to
LSU. I remember that.
He entered the NFL in 2018.
He's probably been
teams he's been on since then.
6 teams. Any repeats?
He's been on 8 teams. He was on Green Bay in December of 2021, and then Jacksonville added him to the practice squad, and then Green Bay got him in free agency in 2022. So he a brief stint in Jacksonville, which was his 8th team, and now he's back with Green Bay. So
wow,
that's what they've done to ensure Jordan Love.
Good in meetings. Good in meetings. That's what you could say about Danny Etling. He's cheap and he's good in meetings.
Short shelf life.
He looks really good with a headset on. Potential future position coach. That's what
like David Webb. He's got a David Webb mark to it.
He attends every practice. That's what doesn't play. We're not talking about games. We're talking about practice. Mm-hmm. All right, we got one more trade this week. We got a 10-team super flex. Darren Waller and Mike Evans on the move for Sky Moore, Trey McBride, and a 24 second.
So I think let's break this down a little bit. So Waller versus McBride, the by far you take Waller over McBride, right? McBride had a terrible rookie season in terms of all the advanced metrics. So that's a clear, Waller, I don't think it's a super high probability, but he is on the list of guys that can finish as tight end 1 and the tight end 1. And when that is the case, they are a tier way above anybody else, right? Just to have that probability. McBride, absolutely not anywhere near that list. Sky Moore versus Evans, right? I mean, what are you trying to accomplish? It seems like the person's trying to rebuild in the worst way is kind of the way that I look at this. They're getting no, real committed asset and giving up 2 useful guys, right? They're kind of here, let's just bleed away a win of warp for.
Well, they're going to say, this is the best I could do. That's going to be the stock phrase. And you know what we're going to say? We're going to say, why are you on the dime to trade now? Why do you have to make this deal in March through July is probably the lowest value you're going to get for these guys. September is probably going to be a much better landscape to make this trade. It's almost like, I always say, like when folks are like almost allergic to going into the season with guys like Waller and Evans, it's like, are you scared of starting out 2-2 and actually being in this thing and being competitive and shooting for the playoffs? Like, it sounds like in March you want to commit to not contending this year, and you're almost afraid with Waller and Evans you might.
Totally. I'm actually writing an article for the site. This trade hits home really, really well in terms of the stuff, right? Deciding to rebuild, and I'll just read you what I wrote in a small paragraph. Deciding to rebuild reduces your optionality. For example, if you decide to rebuild and sell high-level contending players in the offseason, it'd be more difficult to capitalize on breakouts during the season. If you retain contending players in the offseason, you would give yourself optionality in the future to change courses when you have a better idea of the direction of your team. This is that example, right? Like, this is that paragraph in one thing, right? Because like there's a win, right, between Waller and Evans, right? That's probably a win over replacement. And right, so again, if you get a breakout, like you start looking at guys like, if you're rebuilding through some young guys, or you're rebuilding and you got James Cook and you got some of these other younger guys, and all of a sudden they take off, right? The contending veterans that you have are guys that can add to that. They're additive. And like, I don't know, Waller comes out and gets like, averages 9 targets through 3 weeks, right? He's worth way more than this, right? I mean, that's kind of my take on it. Like, I don't think these guys are going anywhere. And, if you're doing rebuilding right, you should be trying to contend this year anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also ask this. I mean, what are the odds Sky Moore has a better season in his entire career than Mike Evans probably has this year? These simple kind of these simple kind of qualifying questions. And in a 10-teamer, yes, that pick is elevated a little bit, but I mean, you got to really hit on that second, to be something that matters in this deal. The later picks in the shallower formats, not a great equation for roster insulation of actually maintaining that on your team. Because you know what, my snarky thought is, well, maybe after this trade you can spend that 24-second on someone maybe like Mike Evans. So maybe you can actually help your wide receiver depth chart, or Tyler Lockett, or Keenan Allen, like try to help your team a little bit with that second, as opposed to spending it on round 3 wide receiver insert profile here that made the Jalen Tolberts of the world. So you got to be really careful, is what I would say. And yeah, this is the classic one of just, and this is why don't be opposed to dealing, Sky Moore, if he's got a little buzz right now, go and see what you can get. I mean, this is adding some ancillary stuff and coming out with 2 guys you plug and play on week 1. So, and I know it's more about studs in 10 teams, but these are 2 profiles that, even if they're past their prime, if you will, they still have stud potential for weeks and for months and for a season or 2. And wait till you see the immense erosion before you go all the way to saying that they're valueless and not worth a first. Just because they're not going for a first doesn't mean you can't value them as such on your roster and if you're dealing with trades.
Yes.
All right. Jordan, I had a dumbest thing I did this week.
Oh, I got one too. So this is great.
Oh, great. I rented a car, but not through the traditional means. I used an ancillary, person to person, and I got a Fiat. If you're familiar with a Fiat, it is a tiny car. I'm surprised.
Small.
I'm surprised I fit vertically, and
right.
Like apparently it's a 4-seater. But I don't know what adult person is fitting in the back seat. I mean, like your leg room is like, it's by your chin, apparently. But here's the other thing. It was not an automatic. I actually had to, there's no clutch. I don't know if you've seen these before, Jordan, but the stick in the console, like I kept having to go, 1 through 6 as I was going up. It was a lot of highway, so I didn't have to do that a ton, but going plus and minus, in terms of shifting. And I mean, with a clutch, I think I would have made it work, but I didn't read, dumbest thing. I didn't read it all the way, I guess. That should have been listed in the profile. And the other part is, when I was going about 70 on the highway, I felt that like I was maxing this thing out. And I'm just in this tiny car. I understand when people talk about having, whether it's a bigger car or a truck or a van or something, and you just feel more secure. I definitely did not feel secure in a Fiat in the busy Florida highways of bustling traffic. In this tiny car that is, I mean, it was smaller than a VW. The new, it looks like an orange slice. Like, I mean, very, very tiny. And in retrospect, I did that to save like $9 for the 1-day rental. I definitely could have splurged for a traditionally sized car that I definitely would have felt safer about. Yeah. What do you got?
It's pretty good. So I spent a lot of time trying to get credentialed for the Syracuse University Football Pro Day. Again, I am in Syracuse, and I said, I want to go see Sean Tucker participate in the Pro Day. So spent a lot of time, got rejected, didn't give up, and actually, got credentialed after a lot of effort. So I drive over there, take my afternoon basically and go up there. And I'm standing there, and you text me, and you're like, hey, did you see this report that Sean Tucker's not participating? I was like, I think he's over there. Like, I can't really see.
You're like,
that
he's there. Like, no, that's wrong. And I was like, okay, great. I'm glad it's working out.
Looking, and I'm like, I don't know. The guy that I thought was Sean, they weren't wearing numbers, and so the one guy was without a shirt on.
Half of
them
are shirtless.
I'm pretty sure that looks like Sean Tucker, but he just ran like 4.53, and I was like, I don't think that's Sean Tucker. And so I walked over there, and I was like, is Tucker participating? He's like, no, and I'm like, damn. So I wasted like,
you weren't interested in a priority free agent cornerback, Jordan? That's not
there
why
was
you
some
were
good
there.
Offensive line work going on. Yeah. So I did learn a little bit about that, but yeah, besides that, not a whole lot there. But
so the hoops, how many hoops? You went through significant hoopage to go there, and then it turned out, I think you left before it was done, right? I think I was texting you that day. Yeah. Did not complete.
Did not. Yeah.
All right. And you know what? The good news is, Jordan, now you're in there. You're in the circle of saying, well, I was there last year. So I don't know if you could use this, alumni of the Pro Day as a scout, a formal scout now, because you might want to be there for it's a Rondé Gaskin the second, right? Next year. Right. So you don't want to get in there on that 6'4",
by the way. That was part of my pitch on the rejection email. I followed up and was like, listen, I'm a Syracuse-based company, and I want to cover guys like Sean Tucker. Gadsden's going to be a guy next year. I kind of leaned right into being the Syracuse guy, and Gadsden was a big selling point of my pitch. And
boots on the ground.
We'll see. I did want to try and see if I could get the head coach to answer how fast he ran, but I didn't get a chance to ask him any questions. So.
Yeah, and so not a big Tommy DeVito fan, or
Andre Schmidt, their kicker, is pretty good. He banged a couple in. I believe it was like 57 yards. So pretty good seeing him there. Yeah, so it's good.
Excellent. All right. So again, not worth the trouble, but you know what? In the future, it might be, because you set a precedent. And sometimes getting your foot in the door, it's easier to kick it open in future years than it is to get your foot in the door originally.
Correct. All right, we got their long snapper also trying out. Short person would be one of the shorter people I would imagine in the NFL. Built like an absolute fire hydrant. The size of that guy's legs, remarkable. So I hope he gets a workout someplace, because he's going to need like the XL quad pants. Like, the guy's enormous, but quite short.
Long snapper is always like that linebacker type size, and you just have to be. You want a good 40, something in the 4.5s probably would be ideal. Maybe 240 pounds, undersized, can block, can chip a little bit. Anyway,
yes.
We got a couple quotes here to end from the Football Guys Dynasty Forum. So go into those completed Dynasty trade section of the message board if you want to be included with trades on a weekly basis, but also here getting some quotables. I'm going to start off with the one just to see how long Jordan goes on this. I'm going to wind the music box and see how long it goes, and that will determine how many other quotes that I read. This may be the only quote I read for this section this week. At some point, you have to play for a championship rather than the draft.
That's true.
Oh, okay. That was quick.
That's true.
Yeah. And the talk was that, some of these teams, they were talking about, oh, well, I always trade picks for future picks. And it's like, well, at some point, someone basically said some version of, well, the picks have to turn to players, or the picks have to turn to production. Otherwise, what are you doing? You're kicking cans, and I get the idea, of trading first to try to get high leverage lottery chances at a high first in the future. But at some point, you need to turn it into either that player, or you need to turn it into part of your starting lineup. And that was a pretty big and rousing discussion if you want to go to the forums over there at Football Guys between episodes here this week.
Yes.
All right. Regarding Rashad Penny, I don't need 10 games. I just need him playing in week 16 and 17. Tough ask.
By the way, so a couple of fun stats. Boston Scott signed for more money than Rashad Penny did, right? So that's number one. Number two, I think there's a really good chance that Kenneth Gainwell is their starting running back, right? So those are the two observations I have about that backfield.
They like Kenneth Gainwell.
They do.
To an unable to understand amount. So we've had these situations before. It's like we had cross sections of, I think, multiple teams with Dare Agumbawale. But these NFL teams are just infatuated with certain players, and it feels like Gainwell is one of those players for the Eagles. But yeah, the amount of money, minimal. They haven't gotten through a critical mass point of the draft. We mentioned the Eagles with Bijan Robinson, which could be in play. Anywhere with that later first, day 2 picks. All these are worrisome for Rashad Penny, independent of the fact that he has over, 100 touches, 100 carries one time in his career. So set your watch. Is he healthy week 1? Is he healthy October? Is he healthy November? Mm-hmm. These are all critical thresholds to cross for Rashad Penny. So getting him to play week 16 and 17, they may have moved on to someone else by then.
Yep.
We got one more here. At some point, you should pick rather than trading trading current picks for future picks. Some people seem to always sell their soul for the next draft. We're in the midst of that right now, right? Last year, 2023 was going to be great. And now 2023 is a down year, but 2024, rest assured, is going to be great.
Yeah, until we spend a year, like it's the same cycle, right? Like it's the same. I mean, it's just time is it's like a flat. Time's a circle, right? I mean, it just keeps repeating itself. It seems like, yeah. I mean, we're gonna spend a year
until players don't come out. The players that you assume everyone here. The big problem I have, independent of the down last year, and someone falling from grace. You also have the factor that not everyone's coming out. So everyone that you think is eligible, it's amazing. Because like when I do my tracker for my Devy leagues and stuff about like, here's all the players and you put them into the bucket of now they're 2024. You're gonna copy and actually cut and paste to the next one like half of the guys. It's amazing. And some of them were like fringe, like we kind of think they might be, early day 3. But guess what? If you're an underclassman and you have more remaining years and you get the advisory grade of round 5, are you coming back to school, especially with nil and everything now, or are you going to run into that meat grinder and you're going to be a day 3 guy fighting for a roster spot? You're probably going back to school. Mm-hmm. There's even more incentive now. So the whole idea that you're going to get this huge barrage and just uber depth, no, there's going to be plenty of new names cropping up, but a lot of the names you think now, they're going to recycle and they're going to be 2025. So be really careful just about who you think is in that population for the next class.
Yeah, quarterback, that's especially true. Receiver, there's a lot of whiff on that. By the way, I saw a funny quote today where I posted a trade about I posted a comment about someone sold Josh Allen for Justin Fields on a 2024 first. And I was like, I'd like to report a murder. Someone responded with the thing, well, the 101 that pick could be Caleb Williams. And I was like, you know what the trick to this the whole mathematical principle here? Josh Allen's never going to allow that to happen. Right? If you have Josh Allen on your team, you're not going to pick one. Right. I mean, you're
going to just miss the playoffs right, as a worst case.
Right. Correct. Yeah. He's just such a floor raiser that that's why you trade for him. Right. I mean, so if you have Josh Allen, you're never going to get Caleb Williams. So that's,
if anything, the new Josh Allen owner should try to get the first from the other team. That's
right.
that's really leaning on Justin Fields. That's correct. Go reversey there. All right, jam-packed episode.
By the way, I wrote a 2,400 word article for the site that's in the editing process. It's a deep editing process, basically about how wide receivers score and about how Justin Fields is an absolute catastrophe for DJ Moore. So we'll have something to talk about in coming weeks.
Excellent. Yes. And you've been very active. We've got Dan Hendry as well. We've got Jeff Bell, a number of good resources. We had a 3-round mock draft up on the site as well. So if you want to get all geeky with the NFL draft, go and find that. You want to sign up for the daily email because you're going to get links. You're going to get partial articles, complete articles there in the newsletter on a daily basis called by Joe Bryant from Stuff from the Site, as well as all the news items. I haven't mentioned that in a while, but you want to go over there and it's a big box of just signing signing up there at the top of the homepage. And a lot of organization, just to bookkeep here at the end, over there at footballguys.com, that you can sort right away by author. You can sort by dynasty, redraft, best ball, IDP. A lot of IDP coverage, going into the draft, more so than previous years. And as you mentioned, Jordan, I mean, you've talked a lot about dynasty trading over the last couple of months, and dynasty has really seen a boost this offseason. It's been a concerted effort and good things over there at footballguys.com. In addition to just having more dynasty rankings, more rookie rankings this time of year, and that's a positive sign for right after the NFL draft when you're going to need them most. So that's going to do it this week on the show. I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your dynasty leagues.